This is the JetBlack Victory, arguably one of the most interesting smart trainers in the market today. And I've been putting it through its paces for the past few months, not just me, but my wife as well, including multi-hour sessions and more, and not just Zwift, but other training apps as well. In this review, I'm going to dive into what works well and what might fall a little bit short. And about now, you're probably like, who the heck is JetBlack? Well, fear not. They're actually super well known inside the indoor cycling industry. So well known that Zwift actually tapped JetBlack to create their very first trainer, the Zwift Hub, a couple years ago. So then the very first thing to know about the JetBlack Victory is the price, $399 US, which is far below all their competitors given all the features that it has in it. This is, again, from a spec standpoint, and we'll get the specs in just a second, closer to like an $800 to nearly $1,000 trainer. But at that $399 price, you have to make a choice, which cassette you want to put on it. You basically have two different cassette options. Well, you will have two different cassette options. As of right now, this is the option that it's shipping as of today, which is the Zwift Cog version 2.0. But later on this year, or sometime soonish, you'll also be able to choose your own cassette if you want as well. And the price for that will also be $399, just like it is with the Zwift Cog. Fear not though, you're not like shoehorned into that decision forever, because you can easily swap back and forth. For example, I can swap over right here to a regular cassette, as I did, and use the trainer just like a regular cassetted trainer. That's because from a technology standpoint, this has all the exact same tech inside of it. These cassettes are dumb. I mean, like, literally it fell apart. Not dumb in that way, but there's no smarts in these cassettes. I'm just making a mess here. There's no smarts in these cassettes at all. All the smarts is in the trainer. And so it's simply whichever cassette you put on it, you tell the app what you're using, and you're off and running. Generally speaking, a cassette like this will cost somewhere between 50 and 70 bucks, give or take, depending on which cassette you want. And you can, again, swap them pretty easily about 2 to 3 minutes. So what does that cassette choice mean? Well, it means more than you might think. In the case of the Zwift Cog right there, that means that you can largely only use it with Zwift, at least if you want to shift. That's because in the case of the Zwift Cog, what it does is it has this single cog that you can see right there, single cog up there, which makes it compatible with all sorts of bikes. So if you have multiple bikes in your household, either of your own or with other people, you can have a 10-speed, 11-speed, 12-speed, whatever the heck you want, and it just has one cog there. Versus a traditional trainer with a cassette like this, you basically have to have the right type of cassette for your bike, otherwise things just don't sound all that good and it doesn't shift right and all that kind of goodness. The downside, though, to the Zwift Cog is that, again, it's only really compatible with Zwift. That's because when you shift, you don't use your shifters on your bike. You instead use one of these little Zwift clicks. There's two buttons they call it a click, but the point is, you use a Zwift click, and that does your shifting. So you go and press that button to shift up or down through this virtual cassette. But that virtual cassette, this Zwift click, only works with Zwift, versus a traditional cassette like this works with any app out there. Now, there is a catch to that. You can use a Zwift Cog with apps that have structured workout support, so-called erg workout support. That's because there's no shifting in a structured workout. You're just simply along for the ride. The trainer is automatically changing the power to whatever your structured workout says. The point on this little distraction is both awareness and that what your limitations might be with a Zwift Cog, but also awareness that it's just not that big a deal to switch down the road. You can buy it today with a Zwift Cog, and if you have another cassette sitting around your house, you can swap it right now to the other cassette and be off and running on whatever platform you want. Okay, so with that, let's talk specs. There's the specs right there. I'm not gonna go into each single line item on this right now, because I'm gonna do that through the rest of the review. The big ticket ones that you'll see there are the accuracy at plus or minus 2%, which is pretty solid. You'll see that its maximum incline resistance is 16%, also probably more than you want to pedal up. And then you'll see that resistance wattage is 1800 watts. If you're not sure if you can do 1800 watts, you can't. It's as simple as that. Just for context, I'm generally topping out at about 1000 watts or so. And yeah, that's pretty solid in most cases. This trainer will more than cover you for virtually every single person watching this video. From a protocol standpoint, it has pretty much everything you expect, but it also has support for Wi-Fi as well as USB-C. In fact, there's a USB-C port at the bottom right there that would allow them in the future to connect to various apps. Though no apps support USB-C connectivity to those apps today. Now, we'll talk about all the rest of the specs throughout the rest of the review. Speaking of which, if you're finding this review interesting, just frankly, watch it all the way through. That is all the YouTube gods care about these days is watch time, retention time. So if you could watch it all the way through, that'd be super helpful. So when it comes to getting this out of the box, it's pretty straightforward. There is the box. You take it out of the box, it's got its legs off to the side there. You attach the legs, it takes like 2 minutes. It's really pretty easy. You've also got a box with a click in it. That's this little thing right here. Depending on which shipment you're in, the very first shipments will be the black ones. The remainder of the shipments will be the colorful ones. There is no technical difference between these two. It's simply that Zwift changed the colorful ones in the last month or two, and the black ones are the one before. But Zwift has confirmed they are technically identical internally. So from there, you go ahead and put your bike on the trainer. It is a direct drive trainer, which means you take off your rear wheel and put it directly onto that Zwift Cog in the case of the Zwift Cog. What's cool though about the Zwift Cog 2.0 is it has an indexing system. That allows you to rotate this little piece up here. You hear the clicks? And as it does that, it'll shift it slightly to go ahead and make it perfectly in line with your chain, with the goal of that to make the whole system a little bit quieter. The first version of the Zwift Cog didn't have that. That was a black version. This one with the orange on there does have that. And of course it has the numbers there, the 10 different indexing adjustments. Meanwhile, up on your handlebars, you're gonna attach the Zwift click using the rubber bands and the little rubber thing, and just stick it wherever you feel like it. And with that, we'll crack open Zwift to pair it. I'm saying Zwift now, we'll get to other apps later on. Within Zwift, you basically have two core choices. Do you want it to be on ANT+ or Bluetooth Smart? But as I said, this trainer has Wi-Fi. So if you use the JetBlack app to first configure Wi-Fi onto your home Wi-Fi network, then from there on out, you don't really have to touch the JetBlack app again. You can just do it in Zwift, and you'll see the Wi-Fi option now listed in Zwift for the JetBlack unit. That means you can connect to Wi-Fi as opposed to ANT+ or Bluetooth Smart. And the reason you might want Wi-Fi is if you use Apple TV for your Zwifting, as I do right over here. That's because Apple TV has a 2 Bluetooth connection limit plus its remote control. So if you had the trainer counting as 1, and then you have the Zwift click counting as 2, that maxes out your devices. But that leaves you kind of short if you want your heart rate strap. But if you have Wi-Fi, that's not considered one of your Bluetooth devices. However, JetBlack also has a solution for that as well. That's because this has so-called heart rate bridging in it, which means that it'll go ahead and pair to your heart rate strap, either ANT+ or Bluetooth Smart, and then channel it through the trainer's connection. That's a pretty big deal. That means on Apple TV, you can basically sidestep any of the Bluetooth limits at all and just go straight through Wi-Fi for pretty much everything except the Zwift click. Okay, so now it's time to actually start pedaling on a course of your choosing. From a road feel standpoint, it's good. The inertia is good. That's one of the core things you look at from a trainer perspective. When you accelerate, does it feel realistic? When you decelerate, does it feel realistic? All that stuff. It's in the same general ballpark as a kicker core, which makes sense because the flywheel weight, which is one of the biggest factors in inertia, is very similar to the Wahoo kicker core. But it's not just flywheel weight. It also comes down to the internal gearing. And I had the chance to open this up, not on purpose. I had dropped the little disc brake kind of separator thing into the slot there. Don't even ask. I managed to do that somehow. So I opened this up and got to see inside of it. So that's what it looks like inside. Notably, you'll see that the upper chamber is separated from the lower chamber. So the upper chamber is where the sweat could pour down in right there. But the lower chamber is protected there. That's where the electronics are. In any case, when it comes to inertia, all is good there, super responsive, no problems at all. If you look at things like noise or how loud it is very, very quiet. Essentially, the only noise you're going to hear is going to be your drivetrain. That still obviously exists there, both the front of your bike in terms of the chain ring, as well as in the back here with whatever cog or cassette you have on there. But the actual trainer itself is just the slightest of little hum there. For context, here is a short little video clip taken here in the DCR cave, just so you can hear what it sounds like. Okay, here's a simple audio test as I'm pedaling along. But it's into a kind of steady state right now at 250 watts. Then do a quick little sprint. Now, when it comes to shifting, you're going to press that little click button there to shift up or down your virtual cassette. You technically have 24 gears in that virtual cassette, though practically speaking, you're going to mostly, at least in my case, mostly stay between like 12 and 18. All this works exactly the same as other trainers that have virtual shifting with Zwift. It's instant, it's responsive. I have no real complaints there, other than the fact that it's reducing realism. I still like clicking and pressing the gear shifters on my bike. I think that's a core part of how it feels realistic to ride a bike indoors, but I also understand that a lot of people like pressing the buttons, and it works great. And again, this system works great when you have multiple bikes on a single trainer with different cassette types. In addition, the JetBlack Victory has what's called race mode, or basically a higher data frequency or higher update rate mode, 10 times a second as opposed to the usual once a second. You'll see this in the corner there, that power number is moving and fluctuating very, very quickly, as opposed to just being the once a second that you normally see. Now, at this point, we've talked mostly just about Zwift, but the reality is this trainer works with every platform out there. And as I said earlier, I've been using it a lot in TrainerRoad, in erg mode or structure workout mode. And in fact, I've been doing that with the Zwift Cog. I haven't even bothered to put the cassette on it for most of my TrainerRoad workouts because there was no reason to. In that structure workout mode, there's no shifting at all. The trainer is doing the changing of the power, and thus you're just along for the ride. But if you want to put the cassette on there and then use other apps, you can use it in IndieVelo, you can use it in Rouvy. All those apps work just fine with it because they're leveraging the pre-existing standards that are in the trainer. So ANT+ FEC as well as Bluetooth Smart FTMS. But just to be super clear, if you leave the Zwift Cog on there, you cannot do shifting in Rouvy or IndieVelo or TrainingPeaks Virtual, whatever you want to call it now, with the Zwift Click. This is totally proprietary to Zwift, which does definitely suck, and I'm going to continue beating that horse that Zwift built their entire company on open standards and has pushed a lot of trainer companies to adopt this and is ultimately locking those trainer companies and consumers to this little click, which is proprietary to them. So I'd really like to see Zwift allow other companies to leverage this in the same way that Zwift leveraged all those open standards to get to where they are today. Without that, Zwift would have not succeeded in this space. Okay, so let's talk accuracy. We're going to talk both erg mode or structure workout mode workouts as well as simulation mode workouts. And this very first workout that we're going to look at right here is actually one in TrainerRoad in the structure workout mode. And this is compared against Vivero Asiomo MX pedals as well as a Quark Red, basically their Gravel Explorer group set right there. So you can see from this graph that at a high level they look very, very similar. One of the things to note though is that one of the slight downsides, if you will, is that JetBlack has what's called erg mode smoothing on, which makes its lines look absolutely perfect in erg mode. That's not real. Those are just kind of, I don't want to say fake numbers, but they basically just spit out the number that you told it was going to be. As opposed to, you see the power meters are fluctuating because that's actually what's happening in real time. I would love to see JetBlack turn off erg mode smoothing. All the trainer companies allow you to turn that off. That's kind of the one slight downside here. But at the end of the day, the power data is accurate. And you can see that by those other power meters on the unit, basically showing the same thing. Cadence also is spot on perfect here, the estimated cadence through that. Next up, we got a Zwift structured workout. As you can see here, basically the exact same story again. It's spot on, very, very close, just a couple watts difference between the different power meters. And again, cadence is spot on as well. I won't labor these, like they're perfect. Let's just kind of move on. TrainerRoad 30 by 30s. Now this is interesting for a couple different reasons. I always do a 30 by 30 test to see how quickly it can respond in structured workouts. So going from roughly about 150 watts up to roughly 450 watts. And the goal there is to do that in generally 2 to 3 seconds. You don't want it to be actually like sub 1 second. If you have sub 1 second changes that fast, it's like running into a brick wall. It is incredibly difficult to do and just not all that awesome feeling, to be honest. Inversely, you don't want it to be more than like 3.5, 4 seconds. Beyond that, it starts to really impact things like micro intervals and stuff like that. So 2 to 3 seconds is the sweet spot. And if we look at TrainerRoad's blue block graph there in their own app, you can see it initiated about 1 second prior to the start of the interval and took 2 seconds in total to get there. So spot on. And the power data also agrees with that as well. If we look at the power data, you see all those power meters are matching that. Again, 2 seconds across the board. And the stability on that is very solid as well. No problems there either. Next, looking at a simulation mode ride in Zwift. Basically, when you're going up and down hills, how it responds to that. And this is notable both for the flat section, where you're going to have really high flywheel speeds, as well as the slower sections where you're going up and down the climbs. And still, it was spot on there across the board from an accuracy standpoint. Like again, the data looks perfect here across the board no matter what I throw at it. And this has been true of not just my workouts, but my wife's workouts. Like everything's been spot on for months now. So then, where do we stand overall? Well, in short, I would argue this is probably the most impressive trainer we've seen in this indoor cycling industry in years. Sure, there are far more expensive trainers like the Tacx Neo 3M, which costs like, I don't know, $2,000 or something like that. And yes, that has crazy impressive structure workout erg mode accuracy. But this is like everything you would want for $400. And the accuracy of this is just a tiny bit below that $2,000 trainer. And sure, this doesn't wiggle, wiggle, wiggle move like the Tacx Neo 3M or the Wahoo Kicker Move, but it does everything else. And those top-end trainers, that $2,000 trainer for Garmin, doesn't include Wi-Fi, for example, and it doesn't include race mode, and it doesn't include a lot of other things that this has at $400, which is it's a pretty big deal. And now I'll have a separate video talking about kind of my trainer recommendations across the board, probably sometime next week. Ultimately, I've yet to find any meaningful downsides to this trainer, both in the gazillions of sessions I put on it, as well as a whole boatload of longer multi-hour sessions my wife has put on it. The real problem with the Victory will simply be availability. Right now, this trainer is largely sold out into, well, the December timeframe and even early January, depending on where you are in the world. And if I look at the numbers they've told me for their containers and per month and all that kind of stuff, supply is going to be a problem for quite a long time, in fact. So much so that, people often say, well, it's a good problem to have. Yeah, to a degree. I mean, I think this is probably going to be one of JetBlack's biggest things they need to focus on, is how to increase that supply to meet the demand. Not just the demand of today, but realistically the demand of the next year or so. Because I don't see many of their competitors having options in the market anytime soon at this price point or even anywhere near it with these feature sets. Mostly because I don't think they have the cost structures to be able to pull that off. It's not going to be possible for a Garmin Tacx to introduce a $400 trainer at this price point. Also, they haven't introduced a new sub $2,000 trainer in 5 years. But nonetheless, if you can get your hands on one, it's a fantastic trainer. It's a solid deal and a very strong recommendation. With that, hopefully you found this video interesting and useful. If so, give it a like down the bottom or subscribe or whatever you click on there is great. Much appreciated. Have a good one.